that dynamic of like the wife being lowly and she's only been made as a compliment, which is kind of just to be the pretty face and the thing there for the husband to relieve his desires and needs. It leads to a lot of abuse in this religion, and that's very sad. And women just don't have voices. Yeah, they think everyone else is led by Satan.
Yeah. It's pretty conceited if you think about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. His mom and my mom blocked my phone number. Like, it was just an all out, like, we are dead to
All
them.
right, why don't we start with your name?
My name is Alissa, and thank you for having me. This is great.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
So, I was born and raised a Jehovah's Witness, and I always had kind of an interest and intrigue in watching the documentaries on, the cults and the different religious cults. And I never knew I was actually raised in one until 2 years ago. And that was an interesting thing to find out and to deconstruct from.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said you grew up in the church then?
I did, yes. I was born and raised fourth generation. It was all I knew. It was all my entire family knew. And I never imagined a day would come that I would be viewing things any differently than the way I was raised.
Mm-hmm. We talked a little bit ahead of time about the fear that held you there. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, so there's different levels. The biggest one being they believe Armageddon is going to come any day. And they have been saying this for probably 100 years, that the end is coming, the end is just around the corner. Stay faithful, stay in it so you don't die at Armageddon. They had a child's book that depicted in very graphic detail what Armageddon would look like, and that would be dead bodies everywhere. And, the police turning and governments turning on the Jehovah's Witnesses. That was a huge fear. I remember being a child, and any time a huge storm would come through our area, I thought that was Armageddon starting. Um, I remember having a little like bin that I kept little keepsakes in, and when there were tornado warnings or huge thunderstorms, I would run and hide in the basement thinking it would keep me safe from Armageddon happening. And um, that's terrifying. It is not normal, I think, for children to have that much pressure and weight on you, of
Mm-hmm.
an end of the world kind of vibe. And then there's also the psychological level of knowing that if you get excommunicated or you leave, you will lose everyone. So you do your very best to stay in the center of that organization and religion to avoid being outcast and having nothing or no one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that kind of goes into our next point about the fear of disfellowship and shunning.
Yes. Yeah, that's something that you know from a very young age. The way they handle disfellowshipping is an announcement is made at your one of your church services so that everybody knows whoever the person is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Um, there's a lot of shame surrounding that. So
Mm-hmm.
as a child, you would hear these names and you'd be so shocked, like, oh, I know that person. I was just talking to them like a week ago, and now I can't speak to them. I can't even like acknowledge their existence. I actually lost my sister to disfellowshipping for a year when I was 15 years old. That is a very traumatic thing to go through when you have to turn your back on a family member. So the standards you have to live by to avoid that. And you just don't want it to happen because you know you're going to lose everyone, especially when you're raised in it. I had some family on my dad's side, aunts and uncles and stuff, that were not Jehovah's Witnesses, but we didn't have a relationship with them because you're supposed to stay away from worldly people. So I would have had no one if I got thrown out and excommunicated as a child.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how old were you when you were baptized into the church?
I was 13 years old,
And you were quite
and
young then.
I was very young, and that is pretty average age.
Okay.
Um, if you get past the age of like 16 and you're not baptized, people look at you like, what's going on? Like, what are you hiding that you don't want to be baptized? I mean, there are kids as young as like 8 and 9 years old being baptized in this religion. And that is one of my biggest issues with it because they tell you it's a lifelong commitment to God, but it's really a lifelong commitment to that religion. And if you were to ever change your mind, or like I did, I turned 30 and became a mother myself and questioned things. You can't do that. You have to stay in it, or you will get excommunicated, disfellowshipped. You have to personally write a letter to leave. Um, but no matter what avenue you go, you're going to get shunned. So I just don't think children should be making that big of a commitment to a religious organization.
Yeah, yeah, that's extremely young. So there was a lot of pressure to conform then. We
Yeah.
covered that one.
Yes.
That's a pretty young age to make that type of commitment. At any point when you were growing up and even after you'd become part of the church, what was your general feeling? Like you felt like you'd done the right thing? Did you have any red flags before?
You know, I never quite felt like I fit in. Like I always there's a lot of shame-based teachings like um they call you a good for nothing slave constantly in that religion, and they have this level of expectation. So as a woman in it, a female in it, there's not a whole lot of positions you can have. You're not allowed to teach. You're not allowed to hold any sort of like higher level within it. You're supposed to, the highest level you can be is what they call a pioneer, which is like a full time servant out in the field ministry. I'm sure that's what people know Jehovah's Witnesses are. The people that knock on your door, or now they have the carts you see everywhere, and you commit to like a certain hourly requirement. And as a woman, that's kind of your highest level you can get to. That was never something that appealed to me, so I instantly thought like something was wrong with me. I never felt like I fit in anywhere, and I feel like it just as a teenager and even a young adult, I thought that was a me issue. I wasn't spiritual enough. I wasn't relying on God enough. That was a me problem. I never actually looked at it objectively. That maybe that was my own subconscious telling me that like something was wrong within that organization.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point that you bring up about it being a male-dominated environment. How does that work in marriages then?
So they are very, very into the husband is head of the wife. The wife is like the lowest totem pole. Obviously, like kids and wife are kind of in the same level. Husband is in control of everything and is the decision maker and the one you're supposed to respect and not really doubt or question. Above the husband, then, is the elders in the congregation. He has to answer to them for anything his family does. Above the elders is then, it's kind of like you think about it almost like I joke sometimes, I'm a big fan of The Office. It's like Michael Scott is your elder of the congregation, and you've got like your regional managers and that stuff that then they have these different tiers, and it goes all the way up to then the governing body, who are the men who run this organization. It's all men. And as a woman, your only job is to make your husband look good. So you are supposed to be a very meek and mild person, not create any waves within the congregation. You can express your opinion to your husband, but not really others. And your husband can be counseled on your dress and grooming, which happened with us. I was 21 years old and wore something too low. And elders talked to my husband, and it was just this ridiculous micromanaging type situation. So the relationship dynamic for most marriages is probably not the healthiest in that organization. I'm very thankful that I was married to someone who didn't really believe in that kind of dynamic. He always thought we should be equal partners, making equal decisions as a couple. He didn't like having to have the micromanaging, so we tend to keep a lot to ourselves when it came to decisions we made, which I think is probably what has saved us through this entire being in it and leaving, because we always kind of just relied on each other and not the actual congregation.
Hmm.
But that dynamic of like the wife being lowly and she's only been made as a compliment which is kind of just to be the pretty face and the thing there for the husband to relieve his desires and needs. It leads to a lot of abuse in this religion, and that's very sad. And women just don't have voices.
Yeah, yeah, that definitely fosters an environment where people will be taken advantage of and a place where predators would go too.
Yes, yeah, it's not a great thing, and women are silenced a lot, which is super sad to see.
Hmm. Hmm. Why don't you talk about a little bit about the financial sacrifices that you were expected to make when you were there?
So it's interesting because they like to compare themselves to other religions, and they say, we're so much better. This is why we're the one true religion, because we don't tithe, we don't pass a collection plate. They say everything is a voluntary donation, which is true to a point, but also not necessarily 100% accurate.
Hmm.
But they have, I don't remember how frequently they read it, but it was usually like once a month they would go through the accounts within your Kingdom Hall or your hall congregation that you're in to discuss the bills that were needing to be paid and to remind everyone that Jehovah God loves a giving heart. So it was kind of like this pressure on you to donate. They also
Hmm.
had this little like sheet they would send out that was like saying that to help pay for all the worldwide work, it would take like $9 a person in each household to help pay for everything. So it was like there was that set dollar amount that you kind of knew you needed to donate monthly.
Hmm.
Um, and then there's three really big events every year. They're called assemblies. And at those, every single day, they would go through the accounts again, kind of like they do monthly, to let you know like how much the facility cost and how much it was costing to um, cover everything, the lights on, the electricity, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, and I always remember on Sundays, like there'd be a 3 day, so it was like Friday, Saturday, Sundays. Sunday, they would have these moments of like, we are still short, $5,000. If you can, in any way, shape, or form, donate even a little bit, that would be so helpful. Um, my husband and I would donate like $25 a couple times a year. We never were really big on donating because we sort of felt like um, this this one true religion doesn't need these huge facilities and these huge um, headquarters. It just seemed weird to us a little bit, so we just didn't donate a lot, thankfully,
Yeah,
because I'd be very upset had we donated thousands of
yeah.
dollars through the year. But there's tons of people who leave everything to this organization, like in their will when they die. Especially those who have like children who leave. It's like their spitefulness. They like don't give anything to their children, and they leave everything to the organization, from properties to land to like, you know, what is it? Life insurance. Like that's where they're getting their money, is from these people that like feel that's what's going to make them more spiritual looking, I guess. That's kind of the only way I can
Yeah.
word it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
No. Why don't you talk a little bit about medical treatments that you can and can't get?
Okay, so that's something that was what woke me up originally from what made me help see this was a cult. So the biggest thing Jehovah's Witnesses are known for is no blood. So they do not believe in blood transfusions. They do not believe in giving any sort of whole platelets or white blood cells or red blood cells. Like they claim the blood is sacred. So I don't even know what scripture it is, but it was them talking about how you would properly bleed an animal for an animal sacrifice. And they've taken that scripture into saying that blood is sacred, therefore you should never accept a blood transfusion, which is like, when you actually think about it, is so like backwards and makes zero sense. But for years, Jehovah's Witnesses refused blood transfusions. They refused any sort of transplants, like organ transplants. That changed, I believe, in the 80s. You could start having organ transplants. Again, the reasoning behind that, I have no idea. Um, and then in the like early 2000s, they started saying you could have fractions of blood, which they had this laundry list of different types of medical procedures you could do and you couldn't do. You can't, once your blood is out of your body, you cannot take that back. So they were pushing really hard for people to do, I think it's called a cell saver machine. So it's like if you're in a very dire emergency, like your blood is being filtered in and out of this machine, and mixed with some sort of solution that helps it, like your blood volume go up. But all these things, again, it's like they've changed their stance through the years, and it was like, this doesn't make sense. There's nothing that makes sense with this. Um, and also, like, why are they micromanaging this? Because blood is a life-saving medical procedure at times. And there's been so many people who have died from that. And that is what made me and my husband really wake up, because we had children and we're like, there's no way we will ever deny our children life. So if that means we give them blood in an emergency, we would be excommunicated from the religion, but at least we saved our children's lives. It's a huge red flag to me. Like, looking back now, that they can literally ask you to sacrifice your life for a biblical doctrine that has nothing to do with like modern day science and medical stuff as far as blood transfusions go. So
Yeah. So you grew up believing that everyone else was not going to be saved in Armageddon.
yes.
What about other Christian organizations like, the Baptists, the, Pentecostals, all these different faiths, even somewhat similar Catholic. So did you just grow up believing that, even though there was like a billion Catholics, that was wrong and all those
Yeah.
people were correct?
Yes. So they, um, for anybody who has read the Bible or has biblical knowledge, in the book of Revelation, they talk about the great harlot on the back of the wild beast. So they claim that every other religion on this planet and in this world is a false religion that is being led by Satan. Jehovah's Witnesses are the only true religion on this entire world, and the only religion that has Jehovah's backing. And when Armageddon happens, all of those billions of people now will die because they are letting Satan lead their lives, which, it's like I say this and I'm like, that is so crazy sounding. How I ever believed any of this is just mind boggling. But
Well,
yeah,
you were
I think,
conditioned, right?
yes. So I think there's about 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide, and they think they are the only ones that have the key to the truth and the
Hmm.
only ones that truly understand what the Bible says. So yeah, they think everyone
Interesting.
else is led by Satan.
Yeah. It's pretty conceited if you think about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Pretty conceited. Okay, let's talk a little bit about you had said a few red flags. What was your tipping point, and what was it like when you left?
So the tipping point was the beginning of the tipping point was the blood. We did research on that just to see, like, look into that more. And it just was like, this doesn't make sense. There's no way a loving God would ask you to sacrifice your life over something like this that is not explicitly written in his word. The biggest thing was, though, for years we were told, like, how horrible these other religions were, especially the Catholic Church, because they hid pedophiles. And Jehovah's true religion would never do that. Well, that's not true. And Australia, they should get like all the praise in the world for doing a huge investigation back in 2015, I think it was. They went back all the way into the 1950s to research, to look at like all religions, not just Jehovah's Witnesses, but I specifically looked at the Jehovah's Witness findings, and there was over 1,000 cases of pedophiles who had like over 1,800 victims. They were never reported. Authorities had no idea about them. And these men were just handled internally. So they were disfellowshipped or excommunicated for a year, and then they were able to come back in. They weren't even like warning people in the congregation. These men were able to just run rampant in this organization. And that was the biggest eye opener for me. And I remember reading that information and thinking, as a mom of two very small children, I don't feel comfortable or safe with them being in this organization, seeing how they handle that. Since that has happened, there's been more investigations. Pennsylvania in the United States was another thing that recently had, like, they're diving into the organization, and there has been arrests and convictions of quite a few of these men. Same situation, never reported to authorities, just kind of shuffled around in the organization. And that was for me a moment of going like, this is not God's true religion. Um,
Hmm.
he wouldn't allow this depravity and like these depraved humans to stay in his organization for not just a year or two, but for decades upon
Yeah.
decades.
Yeah.
Um, so that was my tipping point.
Yeah. And how did it work when you and your husband decided this isn't for us anymore? How do you leave?
So that's the hard thing, and that's the thing that like is a huge triggering point to where I'm like, this is a cult. For
Yeah.
anybody who wants to claim it's not, like you have to look at the fact that so I was baptized at 13. Um, when we left, I was 35 years old. So 20 years later, I was going, I don't believe this is the truth. I
Hmm.
just don't want to be a part of this organization. You have three options to leave. You can fade, as they call it, which you just kind of go quiet and you try to avoid any interactions with your congregation or the elders in your congregation. And you just hope eventually they kind of like give up on you and just leave you alone.
Hmm.
But with that, you run the risk of even 10, 20 years down the road, if they find out you are celebrating holidays, going to another church, doing anything they view as not a Jehovah's Witness standard, they can just disfellowship you and excommunicate you anyways.
Hmm.
Um, the other option is to do something to get disfellowshipped. And I was like, I'm not giving them that like
Satisfaction.
I'm
Yeah.
not letting them do that. Like I wasn't doing
Yeah.
anything wrong. I was just a mom of two little kids. The last option, which they view as the most extreme, is you disassociate yourself. So you write a physical letter that says, I no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness. I no longer consider myself a Jehovah's Witness. Remove me from your records. Don't contact us. Like, leave us alone. You turn that into the elders of your congregation. Some people actually mail it to New York, Bethel, which is where their like headquarters are. Um, and the thing with that is it's the same outcome. So it's not like they go, okay, this person's changed their mind. Like, we
Yeah.
wish you the best. Have a wonderful life. You're still announced like you're disfellowshipped. So they tell the congregation you're no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses and you are like instantly shunned by every single person.
Hmm. Hmm. So how has that worked with relationships with your family?
We lost everyone. It was a literal split second of a conversation of telling them this is the decision we made, and we were blocked on a lot of things. Um, they told us like they would only communicate with us through my husband because again that like the man is the head of the household. Like his mom and my mom blocked my phone number. Like it was just an all out like we are dead to them is pretty much how they view it. And we tried a couple times to like work something out so they could still be in our kids' lives, and they can't do it. They cannot treat you like a human once you leave. Like you are literally dead to them, and they view you as like a spokesperson for Satan, so they're like terrified of you. So yeah, we lost everyone, and that was the hardest thing, but we knew it was coming. We prepared for it for like 8 months, and it was just we just knew that was what was going to happen.
Yeah. How long has it been since you spoke with your family?
Um, it has been since like October of 2023, so like a year and a half. I
That's a
have
long time.
had I've had like one or two text message interactions with my own father because he was the one who typically was more balanced with things as far as like the rules with the Jehovah's Witnesses went, but he found me actively speaking out online against Jehovah's Witnesses and basically was like, I can't speak to you because you're an apostate. And what they want you to do is to leave and just move on and shut up, pretty much.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and when
and
you
nice and
don't,
loud.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you don't, they get angry and they they think you're deranged and crazy. So,
Well, they lost all their control, right? So,
yes. Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So that's difficult. So how do you explain that to your children then?
That's been hard. So, thankfully our kids are very young. When we left, my son wasn't even 2 and my daughter was only what was she? She was going on 3. So they were very young. And I think
Hmm.
that's our saving grace because my son doesn't have any memory of them. We don't have photos of them around the house. We don't bring them up. My daughter, for the first probably like 8 months, would ask like where they are, when she hasn't seen them. And we did our best to like explain to her in like the best way that a little 3-year-old brain could understand. And we just told her like, because we're teaching our children to be kind, loving humans, that like they weren't kind and they weren't being loving, and therefore we felt they were unsafe to be around. And um, she seemed to comprehend it. There was never really any major emotion about it. Again, I think they were just so
Yeah,
young, it didn't matter. And at this
yeah,
point, she like never brings them up. And I think she's honestly kind of forgotten about them, which is sort of
yeah,
good, as sad as that sounds.
yeah. No, no, I understand where you're coming from with that. So, so is there any chance you'll have, I mean, obviously you're not going back. Is there any chance that they'll change their minds about having a relationship with you, or would that mean that they'd be disfellowshipped?
That would risk them getting disfellowshipped. So um, they are told that like once somebody leaves and is actively speaking against the organization, they are apostates. If you have any communication with them other than what they call necessary family business, so somebody's in the hospital dying, you can call them then. Um, if they're contacting them around them, they run the risk of being disfellowshipped or removed from any position they have in the congregation. So, like, both my husband and I, our dads are elders, which is like the highest level they can kind of be in the organization, in their congregation. So, they run the risk of losing that status, which
Yeah,
they don't want to lose.
yeah,
Um, so, the only way that, like, I think a relationship would ever happen is if the governing body, the guys running this whole thing, soften their shunning policies, which we've seen some changes with Norway has been going after them a little bit about the way they treat people that leave, and they've kind of softened a tiny bit, but they would have to basically announce like, oh well, we weren't totally right in the way that we said Jehovah wants you to handle these people. So I don't ever fully foresee that happening, and especially because
yeah,
I'm very vocal about what's happened to us. So I think that's a it's just never going to happen, and I'm coming to
yeah.
terms with that.
Yeah, that's difficult. I'm to come to terms with that. That was a huge part. I mean, that was your family, right? Um, and yeah, you talk about things changing, but I wonder if that ever really would happen because that would allow other individuals to come into the organization to pick it apart and say, "Hey, something doesn't seem right here."
Yeah, I don't
So, yeah,
I don't ever
yeah,
foresee that happening because they have such control over what
yeah.
information people in have. It would be a free for all, and people would be leaving. I mean, there's already a lot of people leaving. It would be really bad for them. So it's never going to
Hmm.
happen,
Hmm.
sadly.
You mentioned a sibling. Do you have any kind of contact with them?
No, my sister is 3 years older than me, and she was the first one to like block me on everything without even a conversation. Like when we found out, or when we told all of our family we were leaving, I wrote a really long letter to my mom and dad and my sister, just trying to explain myself and to let them know, like I'm still the same me. I'm still Alissa. I still love you. Like I'm not crazy. Trust me, I haven't lost my mind. I know you think I have. I saw her read it because it was like on a read receipt thing, and then I was blocked across everything. Um, I think it's just a testament to the relationship we must have had. I thought we were closer than we were, but it definitely was not the case. And also, I just think that cognitive dissonance, when people in that have it so bad that when they see someone, especially close to them, leaving with maybe valid points, they completely shut everything down because they're afraid to change their mind, I guess.
Yeah. They're afraid, what I believe it's so hard sometimes for people to say I'm wrong,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I was
Exactly.
tricked. I was
Yep.
deceived. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you mind me asking, what do you believe now? What's your faith
Um,
now?
I feel like it's an ever evolving thing. So when we first left, I think because I was so angry about the lies I had been fed my whole life, I kind of was like, I don't believe in a God. If there is a God, I don't want to know God. Um, as I've healed and I've done therapy and I've talked about this, um, I don't know if there's even an official term for it. I know there's a higher power. I don't know if I'm supposed to know them completely and have an intimate knowledge. I believe that they have a hand in what's happening in our lives. And my only hope is that, like, if I die tomorrow and I'm wrong about God or the God I was raised with, that I can stand before them and say, I was a good person and I was just
Hmm.
deceived. So
I
I
got
believe in a God. I just don't know who that God is, I guess, because I don't believe in the
Yeah.
God I was taught, because they taught a different God than every other God that is taught
Yeah.
usually. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Any final thoughts or anything you want to add if you were today to run into someone that, was thinking about leaving the church?
I think the biggest thing is just they tell you and use examples like of the extremes of people who leave and become drug addicts and alcoholics and end up in horrible on the streets abusive relationships. I think my biggest thing would be just don't believe the lies that they're telling you. Like, you are fully in control of your life. If you don't believe it, you can leave and still live a very good moral life and have a wonderful life. Um, and you don't have to have those fears of, like, if I walk away, I'm going to lose everything. I'm going to be on the streets. I'm going to die of drug addiction. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, um, live authentically for yourself, and you are going to live a great life. And don't let the fears keep you in if you have any doubts.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Well, you also have a YouTube page, so I will
I
link
do.
that down below so people
Thank you.
can follow you and everything you're doing.
All
And thank
right.
you so much for coming on and telling me your personal story today. I think it's really
Thank you.
important that people hear the inner workings of what's going on and what life is like after you leave in a positive way.
I agree. And I thank you so much for having me on. I think the more voices we can have out there about this religion, the better, because they've just been known as like the just, spiritual, quiet, happy people. And there's a lot more sinister things behind closed doors. So that's my only hope, is to get that out there.